Welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast with Stuart Fensterheim, LCSW, your source for the latest tips and practical down-to-earth advice on creating emotionally connected, thriving relationships. Now, here's Stuart.
Hi there, and welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert. Thank you for joining me again today on my mission of bringing couples together and really understanding how important you are to one another. That we all need someone in our life that we know has our back. And really someone who we can really consider our best friend and someone who we know will always be there for us. And you know what? That brings me to our topic for today. As some of you may be aware, I did a video yesterday on Ali and what he does for my practice and how he helps the couples in my life and how he helps the couples in my practice really understand how important it is to really be there. And there's no one and nothing more in our world, I think, than a dog that really can let you know that you're loved. And if we as humans could really follow their lead, I think we'd be pretty cool. It'd be pretty neat. And what I've decided to do is bring someone onto my show who's not a therapist. As you know, most of the people that I bring on as guests are counselors who work in the field of relationships. And I brought on Pam Gaber. Pam is a good friend of mine who I've known for quite a while now. And how I was introduced to Pam was something that Ali and I did a while back. We were a therapy team for Gabriels Angels. Gabriels Angels here in the Phoenix area is one of the best known therapy dog organizations who really helps lots of individuals, couples, families. And how I got involved was when I was working on the Gila River Indian Reservation, I was trying to find a way to really have Ali help me both from an educational standpoint, help the Native American population really understand that treating animals respectfully is not only a spiritual thing, but it's absolutely essential because they look to us to really help them and take care of them. So I got a position with Gabriels Angels after going through their rigorous sort of evaluation at a residential treatment center. And I was doing that weekly with my wife and I. We were part of the therapy team, and we would go in there, and the kids these were kids who were in out-of-home placement. The kids just brightened up, and they were all very generally pretty down in the dumps. They were removed from their home. But when Ali would come, their world became brighter. And that's how I met Pam. I met Pam through my work there. So, Pam, I'm thrilled to have you here. And let me tell you guys a little bit about Pam. Pam calls her agency Gabriels Angels, and as you might be able to guess, Gabriel was a love of her life. It's probably the one thing in her world that has meant the most to her, and that's her dog. Her dog, who was a Weimaraner. I hope I pronounced that right, Pam.
Good.
Did I?
Very good. Very well.
Terrific. So, and then Gabriel passed away, and Pam was working, I believe at the time, with a pharmaceutical company that was specializing with pet medications. And she spent about 15 years in corporate America. She was a dink, I found out. And if some of you remember, I did a podcast recently, which is Double Income, No Kids. So she's one of the dinks in our world.
Carrying member, right?
Right. And she has no children because she has hundreds of children, actually. As you know, I call Ollie my son. And all her dog children are ones that she cares so much about, and she makes sure that every team really has a kind, caring trainer and someone that leads them through the work. So, Pam, welcome to the Couples Expert. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Stuart. I'm thrilled as well.
Why don't we start with a little bit more about how you decided to start this agency and why it's such a love of yours?
Well, you know, Stuart, I was in corporate America for 15 years, and many times I was home maybe only 3 to 4 days a month. And, I missed being connected to the wonderful state of Arizona. So after much soul searching, I resigned from that position, and I began to volunteer. I volunteered at Crisis Nursery, which is a lovely haven for children 10 years and under who are victims of abuse and neglect. And I learned a lot about these children. I learned they weren't attached to anybody. I learned they only knew anger and violence. And I tried to be a little bright spot, in their life. And it was January 1st, 1999, that I adopted the most adorable Weimaraner puppy ever born on the planet.
But you're not biased or anything?
No, not at all. No, of course not. All right, I am, so. And so I went to the nursery the next day, and I told the children, I said, guess what? And they'd go, what, Miss Pam? I said, I have a new puppy. And one little boy said, what did you name him? I said, I named him Gabriel. And they, aw. So the next week I went back, and those kids ran up to me and said, Miss Pam, what did Gabriel do? What did Gabriel do? Gabriel had his first bath. And I went back the next week, and they kept asking me, the stories where Gabriel ate his bed. Gabriel ate his bed. Gabriel tore up the drip system, and then he ate his bed. I mean, it was kind of a destructive puppy, to be honest. And during that year, Gabriel grew, and it was right around Christmas, and Gabriel had just turned a year old, and I asked the CEO of Crisis Nursery if I could bring Gabriel, dressed as Rudolph, to the Christmas party for fun. That was my only reason for even asking her. And so I had permission, and Gabriel showed up at the nursery with reindeer antlers, a Just Call Me Rudolph t-shirt, and a big Jingle Bell collar. And I walked in, and those kids looked, and I have a feeling they thought I really brought a reindeer, but they realized it was Gabriel. And they kept running up to him, and, I knew these kids because I'd been there every Friday for a year, and they're normally angry and violent. Stuart, that's what they do. And that day, those kids were different. They were loving. They were kind. They would take that Weimaraner ear, which is like butter, and they'd put it on their cheek. And I can remember one little boy just being admitted to the nursery, did not want to come out to the party, but he was crying, but he kept peeking around the corner to look at Gabe. And, he came out, and his face, I never forget it, his face was tear-stained. And he lifted up his arms, and he snuggled Gabriel's soft fur. And he quit crying. And, we were watching a gentle gray dog reach children like no adult could. And the CEO of Crisis Nursery said, I don't know what happened here today, but would you bring him back? And I felt like someone called my child a genius. And he's pretty open on his calendar, and I said, of course I'll bring him back. And I left, and I got him in the car, and I looked at him through the rearview mirror in my SUV, and I'm like, what did you just do? And if he could have spoken, Stuart, I think he would have said, oh, silly human, I simply do what dogs do best.
Which is show love.
Yeah. And it was amazing.
That brings up for me, being that I work with couples that have such difficulty at times connecting with one another, that those kids especially, we can think about Asperger's, or we can think about people who've been abused by the most horrible ways, and whether or not they would trust any human being or anyone or anything. And what Gabriel did, that example that you gave, is so wonderful, because it really is a demonstration that dogs have a way of allowing people to reach beyond their norm and say, I'm going to get that love that I need so much. Mm-hmm. Have you found that?
Oh, absolutely.
Other times?
You explained it so well. And, these kids aren't attached to anybody. They're not attached to their mom. They're not attached to their dad. And until we can have them have a healthy attachment, then children can learn compassion and empathy and trust. I also like to explain it as these kids, their window's shut, but these dogs open the window. And these kids, they begin to let their guard down. And over time, and it's not one visit, it's Gabriel's visits over time, he established trust with these children. And once they learn that trust doesn't always lead to disappointment, then they can learn to trust others, and then the windows open, and then the behaviors can be taught. Because if we don't do that, these kids will just stay in the cycle of violence.
When you start talking about attachment, it's so critical because as an emotionally focused therapist, what I talk with couples about all the time is that we need to have our attachment needs line up together.
Absolutely.
That if you could really believe that your partner is there and can meet every one of your needs of feeling loved, so many wonderful things can happen. And for some of these folks that I see, part of the dilemma is they've been hurt by so many people, whether it's another relationship or, more importantly, a caretaker, and says, why should I expect the world's going to be okay? They never allowing themselves to open up to let someone in. What you described is, as a child, someone having that experience. Gabriel, in that situation, was the first thing that this child had ever experienced, possibly, where he could say, love doesn't have to hurt.
Right.
And how do you think that also applies? Because I think when I was working with Ollie as a therapy team, you had just started a new program that I recall for individuals, I think it is. And that, to me, was sort of like, aha, this could maybe apply in lots of, more than just children.
Exactly. Well, here's what happened is, first of all, I decided to start the organization because I couldn't join one. There wasn't one. So I thought, okay, that's my calling. So, it's just that what we've seen, again, over time is this relationship that will continue to develop. And I always noticed that if I had 10 children, Stuart, there was always one in the corner, too detached, too traumatized. And I'm not a therapist, nor did I really know what to do, but I couldn't leave 9 other children either. And it always bothered me. And so we went to the Piper Trust here in town, and we kind of launched our idea of what we wanted to do. I wanted to reach those kids, and I knew we'd see less kids, but we're reaching them on a deeper level. And the Piper Trust did initially fund the program for us.
Excuse me, what is Piper Trust?
It's a foundation here in town, a foundation that funds nonprofit organizations. So we did receive a grant from them to be able to start the individual intervention, and it's amazing what the pre and post testing has shown. We have a psychologist on staff that works with the agency staff because these kids are referred to us through the agency that they're in. And then talk about groundbreaking, true animal-assisted therapy, where the dog is written into the treatment plan for this child. And, it's a 12 to 16 week program. The children enter it knowing that at some point, Snickers, Micah, whoever the therapy dog is, he's going to be there, but he's going to leave to go help another child. And we're clear about that because we don't want, again, have trust issues with the children. But the most severely traumatized children are getting the help they need, that as a regular girl with an awesome dog, I didn't know what to do about that. And we're proud of that program. We'll serve, 50 to 75 individual children a year that would have never gotten the help. Now, it sounds small compared to the 14,000, 500 children we will reach annually in the state of Arizona. But those children in the individual intervention program would never have had a chance.
That sounds so incredible. And I think it can be expanded to adults too that have those same kind of traumas.
Absolutely. I mean, animals, this is what I think. Animals help us at all stages of our lives. Gabriels Angels just happens to focus abused, neglected, and at-risk children. That's how the IRS granted our 501c3. But I don't care, every stage of life, and you've shown that so wonderfully within your practice here, that, animals make us better people, and they help kind of soften the shell, if you will, so then other methods can help.
And I think there's some research that I recall reading recently that says when people are around, and I think it's dogs in particular, your blood pressure lowers, and that there's a lot of physiological changes.
Absolutely, yes. And its research has been proven time and time again. And for people that would tend to be not social, because we all know we all need social contacts. The dog gets them out to the park for the walk, and people's lives change. And this research, you're correct, is primarily done with dogs. That, I always say that Gabriel's eyes were a limitless pool of understanding. My cats do not look at me the same way, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's actually very beautiful. You said that. And I can tell, because, when Ollie comes and he wants a treat, his eyes just change, or there's this gentle sadness that says, how you have to give this to me.
You feel sorry for him for a treat. Smart dog.
It's really fun. You brought up the term animal assisted therapy. And one of the things that I think is important for my listeners to understand is the difference between the three classifications. There are service animals, there's dogs who are, and I'm blanking on the term now, which are just therapy dogs. And then you have animal-assisted therapy, and you clarified one of the differences with animal-assisted therapy. They're actually officially in the treatment plan for the mental health professional. The others, there's a difference. So can you clarify?
Well, they're all therapy dogs. They're all either registered through Pet Partners or Alliance of Therapy Dogs. However, what you're leading towards, and what I think is important, is the teams that we have in the individual intervention program are our creme de la creme teams that have been out working in groups, have the experience. And because animal-assisted therapy is new in the state, these teams that are so seasoned can also help the therapist as far as what activities should be done and whatnot. But you're correct; they all have to be registered, and that's really how they carry their liability insurance. So.
And by the way, folks, they're the dogs that you're allowed to touch, and you're supposed to touch. Because a lot of people get confused when they see the vest, and there are many different kinds of vests, but a service animal you're not supposed to go up and pet. These are the dogs that they urge you to touch.
I found a patch that I put on Gabriel's vest store that said, "Therapy dog, I work for hugs and kisses."
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because you're right, we can. That I tell you, the service dog industry has done a great job at educating us because we just assume we can't pet. Mm-hmm. That dog is not really a pet. He's a 24-hour helper for this person. And the main difference is this, that a service dog does something for me that I can't do for myself. So that's service dogs in grocery stores, in restaurants, anywhere. But a therapy dog, I always say, is like regular dog by day, therapy dog by night. So it's a dog with a job, right?
That's right. And the other thing that I want to point out is these are also the same type of dogs that some of you may have seen at medical centers. A lot of the, like Desert Samaritan Hospital, I guess they're now called Banner Desert, had a program, and I actually was involved with them, and there are a number of other ones. And I think the best example of what you were talking about earlier, about dogs helping kids do things that they wouldn't naturally do, like that child sitting in the corner coming out, was a child that I was working with who had I think he had been in a major car accident and couldn't walk. And they were doing the physical therapy, and he was refusing to get out of bed to walk the ward, the unit he's on. So Ollie and I came to his room. He saw Ollie, got all excited, and we very gently encouraged him to come out and take Ollie for a little walk. And he did it.
Yay.
You should have seen the looks on his parents' face.
That's a great story, and one that I had met with a donor earlier before I came to see you, and he does work also with Gabriels Angels and hospitals. Mm-hmm. And, we talked about how that visit, because it just brightens up your day. I mean, you're in the hospital in a bed, and this dog comes in and frequently can lay with you, or will want you to pet him, and it's outward focus, right? To where you're not thinking about why you're in the hospital. That's a great story.
I was looking for some photos because I was going to do some things, and you could find all the time dogs lying in kids' beds in the hospital. Yeah. And, the hospital usually would not allow that, but for these animals, because they know what it does for the kids. So,
right.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about that there's a lot of funding and things. Talk a little bit about that, because I know that you do a lot of fundraisers. As a matter of fact, you just had one.
Well, we just did have one. Here's the difference. I leave the corporate world where I'm working with veterinarians and we're talking about new technology and new products, and it's a very transactional type of thing. And I start this charity. I had no experience in the nonprofit world, and then one day it dawned on me. I'm like, oh wow, I have to raise money. How do I do that? Because that's a fear, a very real fear in many people, because they're afraid to ask for money. And I had to get over that myself. And I had some people that I worked with, and I realized I was asking for the little children. I'm asking for kids. Right. And when I got over that hurdle, I could do it. And then the other irony is, I start this organization, right, because I know that therapy dogs can heal children. And now I get to put on parties, fundraisers, and not my expertise at all. And I have to have people help with that. And we did put on our fundraiser, Unleash the Love, last Thursday at the Desert Ridge Marriott for about 900 people, Stuart. And we had 50 therapy dogs, one at every other table. We had testimonials from kids. We had agency testimonials. We had donor testimonial. And, it's an hour that, there are tissues on the table, because the way these dogs impact these kids, grown men cry. And then at the end of this event, we ask for support, and we're 100% philanthropy. We exist because the amazing people in this community support us with financial investments in making this community a better place.
And what I know from actually participating in one of your breakfasts, that it's all private donations, isn't it?
We have some grants, like we talked about the Piper Trust, but it's all people that understand either what that dog means to them that they have when they go home at night, if they've been a victim of abuse and neglect. Animals just make us better people. I always say sometimes I should have been half the person Gabriel thought I was, and I still would have been pretty good, And I think that, after 16 years in Arizona, we're now, as far as Prescott, all the way down, we have 50 teams in Southern Arizona, primarily Tucson. And, these investments that people make tell us to keep doing what we're doing.
The other thing that I know you once did, I don't know if you're still doing them, for some of my listeners who like to play golf. I know that you've done some golf fundraising.
We've done some, we did a golf marathon where you hit 100 holes of golf, and it's the board's decision every year what one fundraiser do they want to do. And last year we actually went to Top Golf, which was really fun, and did that. So it's a little twist. In the summer, all charities are operating in a deficit. It just is not the time of year to raise money, so the board comes together every summer and does an event and raises some money for the organization.
If someone wants to get involved with the organization, how would they do that?
The best place is to start at the website, gabrielsangels.org. Whether you think you have a great dog, we also have a wonderful volunteer position where you're a helping hand or an assistant to the therapy team. We have committees that work on our events. We have board leadership, which is now we're a governing board, and there are many, many ways to get involved with our organization, because, people that become a helping hand enjoy that if they don't have the right dog, but they go with the same team every week on the visits.
Do you know if there are certain breeds that more likely work better as a therapy dog?
I always thought so, and you might have one of those, right?
No, I know I do. It's sort of a loaded question.
I would say, your typical Goldens and Labs and mixes thereof. But here's what's been amazing.
Didn't you have like a mouse or something strange?
There was a rabbit years ago.
That's what it was.
Smudge the rabbit.
It was a rabbit.
We're always going to be 95% dogs, but the agencies, we have miniature horses that travel in a car and visit with children, but we're always going to primarily be dogs. And what's amazing is I would say right now we probably have 10 of the most amazing, you're sitting down, right, pit bull therapy dogs ever. They've been raised right, they are loving, they are kind, and they teach children the importance of kindness to animals. Because, I started this organization because I wanted to change children's behavior over time, teach them core behaviors. What we've learned in the past 16 years is these kids now have a reverence for animals, and they won't hurt them. There's a saying, and I believe it's true, people that abuse animals rarely stop there.
Right.
It's a correlation between animal abuse and future abuse to humans. So if we can teach these kids that animals are to be loved. I had a young man ask me one time, well, animals can't feel pain. I said, why would you say that? Because that's what he was told, because his family was involved in dog fighting. And he didn't think animals felt pain. But he learned to love my Rhodesian Ridgeback, Noah, and he understood then that animals have feelings too.
The other thing that I used to hear a lot is that animals don't remember. And, some of the training techniques that they've used with some dogs, particularly if they have accidents, they used to say, you shouldn't bring them back and punish or correct them because they won't remember. The research, I think, is now saying they do.
So, when I came home and if Jack had an accident with one of my other dogs and he hid behind the chair when I got in, I'm like, yeah, he remembers.
Yeah, I know. And one of the things you were describing actually very well with the animal cruelty, which is there's a diagnosis in counseling called people who are sociopathy. And one of the criteria in the DSM manual is cruelty to animals.
Oh, wow.
And that is one of the telltale signs. So for me, when I was working on the Indian reservation or other settings, if I saw someone that was doing some cruel behavior with animals, and there's some horrible things that people have done, that's a child we want to watch out for.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's where changing it when they're young, and people recognizes that animals do have a sixth sense. And I've seen when I go on walks, there are certain people that Ollie absolutely growls at, and then there's some that they don't, and I know this.
Yeah, you pay attention to that, right?
I pay attention to that. And how I've used Ollie, and I was talking a while back in one of my videos, that as a counselor for me in helping couples is quite often I have couples who have these intense fights, and they don't really think about the impact around them. So Ollie was here with me, and this couple was really going at each other. And Ollie froze and headed for the door. Mm. And I stopped him, and I turned to them, and he said, "Did you just notice what just happened?" And I said, "If he's doing that, what are your children doing?"
Wow.
And it really is how we can use labs or dogs in counseling. And the two of them took notice because it was the dog.
Bingo.
And changed their behavior, and the therapy just skyrocketed from there. It's an amazing thing that dogs
Have you ever noticed this with Ollie when you were working? And I noticed this with Gabe, that I'd go into a room, and Gabriel would look, and he'd walk over to one kid. And the staff goes, "He did it again." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "That Luis had the worst morning, and he was in temper tantrums and crying and wasn't getting along with anybody." And Gabriel somehow knew and went over there and sat next to him.
I have found with couples, that's what the dogs tend to do. The one that seems to be in the most emotional distress, they pay more attention to.
There you go.
Pam, I want to just thank you for coming on. I think that animals and your love for animals and your dedication to the Phoenix Metropolitan, and hopefully you can expand it even nationally, really can change the nature of our society. I mean, this year has been this and last year, I guess more last year than this year actually, has been awful with some of the things that have happened with school shootings and things like that. And it's all about that feeling different and disconnected. And if a dog or myself as a family counselor helping people really recognize that they're not alone in this world, I think we can change our society and our world.
Yep.
So thank you very much again for coming, giving of yourself, giving of your time. You're very busy, so I really appreciate you doing this. And thank all of you for listening, and I encourage all of you, if you're looking to donate, as tax season's over, but next year, please think of Gabriels Angels as well, because it's quite an organization. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode with your host, Stuart Fensterheim. You're one step closer to reigniting that fiery passion with your partner. For more information
and your 30-minute free phone consultation with Stuart,
visit www.thecouplesexpertscottsdale.com. We'll see you next time.